Hey guys, this is part 3 of cutting body mechanics. Um, the first video and the second video I went over basic body mechanics involved during cutting. This video will be a little more practical where I go over different cutting angles. So let's see here. The second video that I posted, I showed just a regular dodon cut or vertical strike and the different techniques associated with that type of cutting motion. Now, let's start with a downward diagonal strike. In this case, I will be going from top right down to bottom left. So I take my stance, um, and then what I usually do is I move the sword over to an angle and I angle my wrists to make sure that when I go through with the strike, it will be at a straight angle. My hasuji or my edge alignment will be on. And this movement starts from your lower body. Your lower body would have the stance and your knees would be bent. So the power is first coming from your legs and transferring to your hips. So when you take your stance and you go for a cut, my upper body would lead the sword because it's holding it. However, the power is coming with your hips. As I rotate my hips in the direction that I'm cutting, I'm also rotating my knees a little bit and changing my stance very slightly as I complete the follow through and pass through the target, as you can see. Now, what you're doing with turning your hips and going to that stance is you're forming more rotational force because you're turning your body along its center axis. So you're generating even more speed and force behind the cut versus if you just swung with your upper body, you would only generate a limited amount of force because there's only so much power that your back, your traps, your shoulders, your obliques, and your arms and hands can produce. When you turn your entire body, the weight of your body is also going in behind that cut, therefore making the amount of work your body has to do as a whole for one cut much less reduced and less stressful on your body as a whole. Um, Now for the downward diagonal cut, the same thing as I showed you with part 2, the basic cutting um, body mechanics would be, for me, you would lead with your shoulders, elbows, draw a circle through the air, snap your wrist as you come into contact with the target, tighten your pinky and your ring fingers on your right hand and your left hand, and tighten up your wrists and torque them inwards, and then you pull back with your non-dominant hand to obtain the slicing motion of the follow through, and you have just cut through your target. Um, Following all that, um, that cut should be relatively um, easy, if not effortless. Um, Really, you should just be using the weight of the sword in order to complete a simple cut like that. Just a one strike cut, and you would, if you follow all the proper body movements and coordinate all your body parts together, then the cut would be relatively effortless on a single mat or a beach mat, whatever the target is. All that you have to work on at that point is going to be your edge alignment, whether or not you are torquing your wrist too much towards one side, whether or not your edge is dead on as you pass through the target. That definitely will affect the efficiency of passing through the target, and how much recoil and shock the sword is going to transfer from passing through the target into your body. I've had many experiences where I've been cutting bottles and mats where my edge was not on, but the rest of my body mechanics was going okay. So as soon as I struck the target, what would happen is I would strike the target, but say I'm going for a downward diagonal cut like this. If my angle of the blade and the angle that I'm swinging at don't match, as you can see here, my edge is facing too down compared to the angle that I'm moving. Therefore, when the edge strikes the target, it immediately starts to roll as I hit the target, and then my blade will be forced downward into the target, and I most likely will not pass through. I may damage the blade by chipping the edge. I will probably bend it, and I will probably torque the blade as well. All three of those things all in one cut. So that's why I say train with a safe training tool, the bow-ken. Though with the bow-ken, it's hard at times to um, train your edge alignment or hasuji. So it may be a good idea at this point to buy an iaido or an unsharpened metal sword. Those have grooves, so when you swing the sword, you should hear a loud whistling noise, and that'll tell you whether or not your edge alignment is on. Now for different cutting angles, for a horizontal cut, what I like to do is I like to take what's called a horse stance. So for the downward diagonal cuts, I would take what's called a bow stance with the leading leg out in front of me, and I would cut in the direction away from my leading leg. Same applies for this direction, away from my leading leg. However, for a horizontal cut, I usually try to take a horse stance like this. So you're drawing a flat horizontal line um, parallel to the ground. So with a cut like that, you're throwing your force and momentum across in a sideways motion. So having your legs to your sides is going to be beneficial in that you don't lose your center of balance. You won't be thrown in the direction of your cut, and you can just turn your hips and your body and facilitate that cut. So like I said before, take the stance, lead with your shoulders and elbows, snap your wrist as you come into contact with the target. You can torque your wrists if you want to. At this stage, it doesn't matter too much for horizontal cuts, simply because um, torquing your wrists may pose a bit of a danger for actually twisting the blade in the air during mid-cut. So that's a pretty advanced and refined technique that needs a lot of practice and experimenting with to see if you even want to throw such a minute movement in there. But for downward cuts and vertical cuts, it's a pretty good way to help facilitate the separation of the target. So you have the horizontal cut there. Now, something that usually gets me is the rising upward diagonal cuts. Um, I would do the same stance, a bow stance, as a kesa cut or a downward diagonal cut, but in this case, I would actually cut towards my leading leg. And since I'm rising in a diagonal, roughly 45-degree angle, I have no worry about cutting my leading leg. You always want to, for rising, you want to cut towards your leading leg, but for downward diagonal or kesa cut, you want to cut away. If I cut upward rising um, with my leading leg, then there's chances that you may swing your sword too low and accidentally hit your leading leg. So that's not a good idea. So remember, um, remember those little key points. Kesa cut, you're always cutting away from your leading leg. Horizontal, you could do a horse stance. And for a rising upward diagonal cut or a gyaku kesa cut, you would cut towards your leading leg. Now, for a rising cut, the the body mechanics are going to be a little bit different from one side versus the other. Now, I'm going to start on what's called the open side. The open side is when I put the sword at a downward angle as if I'm ready to cut, and my arms are not crossing each other. So there's an open space between them. That's what's called an open side. Now versus the other side, I get ready as if I'm going to cut, and my arms are twisted over each other. And this is called the closed side. And this is what I'm going to be referring to them from now on, because some people may be right-handed, some people may be left-handed, so it's better than ambiguously trying to relate with a right-handed person versus a left-handed person. So I'll just leave it at that. Now, for a rising upward diagonal cut, I find a lot of people, what they do is they hold the sword correctly with the correct grip. They have their hand position, whatever it is they may feel comfortable with. However, what they do is they keep their wrists stiff. They don't move it during the cut. So it'll look like this. So on the open side, I start the movement with my shoulder, put my elbow and extend my elbows, but I don't bend my wrists because my wrists are stiff. And as I pass through the target, I enter it and I follow through with the slicing motion, bringing it in towards me, and that's the motion right here. Let me show you one more time from this angle. Stiff wrists and slicing follow through the target. The problem with a method like this is um, you're actually straining your body a little bit, because when you pass through a target, like I mentioned before, the shock waves is going to pass through the sword and into your hand and your body. If your wrists are stiff, those shock waves will pass really easily through your wrists and through your arm and into your shoulder. So you're actually kind of causing your body a little bit more grief. Um, so over a long period of time, you may feel um, strain on your shoulders. However, I guess one thing that this method does do is it facilitates a really wide slicing motion. And coupled with the power from your hips and your legs from the stance, you can generate a good amount of power, but that slicing motion and cutting through that target is going to leave your shoulders pretty strained over a long period of time. Now, for the open side, what I prefer is that style of motion. However, I snap my wrist as I come through. So I enter the target and leading with my elbow, my shoulder, I snap my wrist and I tighten down with my ring and pinky finger. However, I do not torque my wrists in. I keep them in their same relative position. All I do is snap my wrists right here, and then I drag with the slicing motion and the follow through. To me, it's better because you achieve faster tip acceleration. Because you snap your wrist, you achieve greater momentum and acceleration through that motion. Um, and you can also at the same time achieve that slicing motion by dragging your non-dominant hand in towards your body. Um, so in my opinion, the method with snapping your wrist works better. Um, some people prefer working on the open side, right here. Some people prefer working on their closed side. Now, a lot of people favor their closed side simply because your arms are more stable because they're touching each other. So you have a bit more bodily reinforcement. You don't have to worry too much about holding the sword at a particular angle. Your wrists and your arms are resting on each other. So you have the angle set. You just have to worry about keeping your edge alignment and passing through the target with a snap of the wrist and a dragging follow through. Um, Everyone, I think, favors one side or the other. Most people would probably favor your closed side. Me in particular, I'm the opposite. I favor my open side. So if you watch a lot of the videos where I cut, I usually start with the open side and cut from there for a gyaku kesa or upper diagonal cut. That's just the side I favor, but I do train both sides, so my closed side and my open sides are definitely almost at par with each other. So it's a lot of practice getting into the body mechanics and making sure everything flows when you're cutting a target. All I can say is experiment with the different styles of movement. Um, what feels better for you, what feels worse, make note of that. And like I said before in the previous video, practice consistency. You want to try to achieve the same style of movement every time you pick up a sword and cut something or practice swinging it in the air. Um, and now to get back to Hasuji, let me grab my sword. Get an unsharpened sword. Most of them have a he or bohi, and that's that groove you see right here. Now what this does is, as it passes through the air will channel into these grooves and create a whistling noise. So if you swing the blade with proper edge alignment, it doesn't have to be necessarily fast, you will hear a really loud whoosh or whistling sound. So it should sound like this. So you can hear a really loud, clean whooshing noise. Now, if your edge alignment is off and you're torquing your wrists too much one way or the other way, then what's going to happen is in the direction that your blade is, the edge is facing away from, that side will have more air passing through this channel on that particular side versus the back side. So you will only hear one side with a whistling noise. So it'll sound like this. As you can hear, not that clean of a whistling noise. It's not as loud or it's not that loud of a whistle or whooshing sound. So you can tell that your edge alignment is off. And of course, if you don't hear any whistling noise at all, then that means your edge alignment is really off. So you'd have to adjust your wrist, maybe adjust your grip and fingers. You may have grip the handle incorrectly and not straight, because you have to remember that tsuga cores are shaped with a more oval profile. So there is no flat edge to really help you align your hands and align the edge. So it takes practice getting used to katana tsuka handle, but with practice you'll definitely become more familiar with it, and it'll become just second nature, picking up the sword and swinging it and getting good hasuji. Um, like I keep on mentioning, consistency is the name of the game. So practice consistency and train safely. And once you get really comfortable with handling a sword safely, then you can start moving on to shinken, or real sharpened functional swords, and practice with them. However, if you're having a hard time, always just put down your sharpened sword and go back to your training tools. Um, it's always being it's always better being safe than sorry. And say if you're cutting, if you keep cutting and you're having an off day or something like that, then in the end you're just going to be wasting your time, your energy, and your money spent on the cutting targets. So just I would say probably stop for a little bit, train with your iaido or your boken to see if you can readjust your body and get your edge alignment or your hasuji back on, and then just continue from there. If you can't do it, then just call it a day, because I think it's better that you come back with a calm mind and you're not irritated that you're off, um, and you'll be able to maintain your cool while cutting. It's better to have fun while cutting and being cool about it rather than being irritated and angry. Um, so yeah, there's that. Once again, I'm not any sort of formally trained student or professional. I'm not trying to make a name for myself in any way. I'm just sharing my experiences with the body mechanics involved during cutting and the different styles I've seen and I've experienced um, for the body movements during cutting. So, anyways, guys, have a good one, and train hard and train safe.